The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by living hands. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a station so massive that it had its own gravity and its own weather. 342 species sent their representatives here. They argued, they traded, they signed treaties, and they pretended to like each other. It had been this way for over 12,000 years, and most of the galaxy believed it would stay this way forever. Nathan Cole did not believe that anymore. He stood at the human podium, a small platform near the back of the chamber, far from the elevated seats of the senior species. Humanity had been given this spot 40 years ago when they were first admitted to the council. It was the smallest podium. The lights above it were dimmer than the others. The message had always been clear. You are here, but you do not matter. Nathan was a tall man in his late 50s, with gray hair and calm brown eyes. He had served as humanity's ambassador for 11 years. He had smiled through insults. He had stayed polite when alien delegates called humans the infant species to his face. He had watched humanity's proposals get buried under procedure after procedure, while lesser ideas from older species sailed through without question. He had done all of this because he believed in diplomacy. He believed that patience would earn respect. He did not believe that anymore either. The chamber was full. Thousands of alien representatives filled the curved rows of seats that rose up like the inside of a bowl. The Valori Collective, the ancient hive mind species that had founded the council, occupied the highest platform at the center. Their bodies were tall and thin, made of something that looked like pale crystal, and they glowed faintly with a soft blue light. They considered themselves the wisest beings in the galaxy. They had told humanity this many times. Nathan activated his podium's broadcast system. Every translator in the chamber clicked on. Every eye, every sensor, every tentacle turned toward him. This will be brief, Nathan said. His voice was steady. The United Earth Federation is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. This withdrawal is immediate and total. We will not negotiate terms. We will not accept counter-proposals. We will not be taking questions. He paused. The silence in the chamber was so deep that he could hear the hum of the station's power core far below. Our diplomatic beacon is now deactivated. Any attempt to contact Earth or its colonies through official council channels will be ignored. Any ships entering human-controlled space without prior authorization will be turned away. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal disc, the diplomatic seal of humanity's council membership. He placed it on the podium, turned around, and walked toward the exit. The chamber exploded into noise. Hundreds of alien voices shouted at once. Translation systems overloaded, trying to process the chaos. The Valori Prime Resonance, the eldest of their kind, and the presiding voice of the council, sent out a calming pulse that rippled through the room like a wave of cold water. The noise died down, but the panic did not. Nathan did not look back. He walked through the corridor that led to the human delegation's docking bay, where his ship was already warming its engines. His staff of 12 were already on board. Their personal belongings had been packed the night before. The offices had been cleaned out. The quarters had been stripped bare. Nothing human remained on the station, except the metal disc sitting on an empty podium. 8,000 light-years away, on Earth, Secretary of Defense Laura Griffin stood in an underground command center, buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was a woman of 53, with short dark hair and the kind of face that never seemed to rest. Screens covered every wall around her, showing maps of human space. 37 colony worlds, hundreds of stations, thousands of ships. Ambassador Cole has left the chamber, a voice reported from across the room. Laura nodded. Begin activation sequence for the Threshold Network. Deep in the asteroid belts of every human colony system, machines that had been sleeping for years began to wake up. They were defense platforms, thousands of them, hidden inside hollowed-out rocks and disguised as mining equipment. They powered on, one by one, their weapons warming, their shields expanding, their sensors reaching out into the dark. Within an hour, every human system in the galaxy was wrapped in a layer of silent, invisible protection. Nobody in the Council knew about the Threshold Network. Nobody had even suspected it. Humans had built it quietly over 15 years, piece by piece, hiding the cost inside mining budgets and infrastructure projects. It was the largest secret military project in human history, and it had worked perfectly because the galaxy had never thought to look. After all, humans were the infant species. What could they possibly be hiding? Back on the Council Station, the Veilori attempted to open a formal dialogue channel with Earth. The signal traveled across the relay network at faster-than-light speeds, reached the Sol system, and hit a wall. The channel was rejected. Not busy, not unavailable. Rejected. The Veilori tried again. They tried a different frequency. Same result. They tried every frequency they had. Every single one came back rejected. The Dranaki Empire, a race of tall and heavily built warriors who had always shown a grudging respect for human stubbornness, decided to handle things their own way. They sent a fast cruiser with a senior envoy directly to the Sol system's border. The cruiser arrived, transmitted a greeting, and waited. A single human patrol ship appeared on the other side of the border. It did not return the greeting. It did not open a channel. It simply sat there, engines idling, weapons powered but not aimed. The message was clear enough. The Dranaki envoy waited for 2 days, then turned around and went home. On a Veilori monitoring station deep in the Outer Rim, a junior analyst named Keth was running a routine check on galactic shipping traffic. Keth was young for a Veilori, barely 300 years old, and still eager to prove useful. The data on the screen made no sense at first. Trade routes that normally glowed with activity were going dark, one by one, like stars winking out. Keth pulled up the ship registries and filtered by species. The answer hit like a punch to the gut. Every human ship in the galaxy, every trade freighter, every science vessel, every medical transport, every passenger liner, every single one was moving. They were all heading in the same direction. Home. It was not random. It was not panic. The movements were coordinated down to the minute. Ships on opposite sides of the galaxy had begun their journeys at exactly the same time. Routes had been pre-calculated to avoid congestion. Fuel stops had been arranged in advance. This was not a reaction to Nathan Cole's announcement. This had been planned long before he ever stood up at that podium. Keth sent the data to the Council with a single note attached. This was not a decision made in anger. This was a strategy executed on schedule. The humans planned this. All of it. The note sat in the Council's priority queue for 6 hours before anyone read it. By then, the first human ships had already crossed back into human space, and the borders had sealed shut behind them like a door closing on a house that no longer wanted visitors. The galaxy, for the first time in 40 years, was without its humans, and it had no idea how much that was going to hurt. The first thing to break was the communication grid. It happened 3 days after the withdrawal. A relay station in the outer Venari corridor, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the galaxy, stopped working. Then another one failed. Then 6 more. Within 12 hours, an entire sector of space had gone quiet. Ships that relied on the relay network for navigation were suddenly flying blind. Emergency beacons could not reach rescue fleets. Trade convoys lost contact with their home ports. Councillor Thys of the Sithari Federation stood in his office aboard the Council Station and stared at the reports coming in on his display. He was a tall reptilian figure with dark green scales and sharp golden eyes. He had served on the Council for 30 years, and in all that time, he had never seen anything like this. "How is this possible?" he asked his aide, a younger Sithari named Vorin. "The relay network has been stable for centuries." Vorin pulled up the maintenance records. The answer was right there in the data. plain as daylight. Human engineers had been maintaining 63% of the galaxy's faster-than-light relay stations. They had designed the latest generation of relay hardware. They had written the software that kept the signals clean and the routes optimized. When the humans left, they took their people, their tools, and their knowledge with them. They did not sabotage anything. They did not need to. They simply stopped doing the work that nobody else knew how to do. The Oromi Trade League, a coalition of merchant species who prided themselves on their technical skills, announced that they would repair the relays themselves. They sent their best engineers to the Venari corridor with confidence and enthusiasm. 2 days later, one of their repair teams accidentally triggered a cascade failure that knocked out communications across an additional sector. The Oromi quietly stopped making public announcements after that. But the relays were only the beginning. On the agricultural world of Thessar Prime, a Sithari colony near the Outer Rim, the crops began to die. Human agricultural scientists had spent 15 years redesigning the farming systems on that planet. They had adjusted soil chemistry, introduced new irrigation methods, and created hybrid seed strains that could grow in Thessar Prime's thin atmosphere. The local farmers had been trained to maintain the systems, but they had never been trained to fix them when something went wrong, and something always went wrong. Without the human advisors, the irrigation network developed a fault that nobody could diagnose. The hybrid crops, sensitive to changes in water mineral content, began to wilt. Within a week, 40% of the harvest was lost. Thessar Prime sent a desperate request to the Council for emergency food supplies. They were not the only ones. 11 other worlds sent similar requests within the same month. On Earth, Admiral Kevin Bradley sat in a quiet room at Fleet Command Headquarters in Houston and read through the recall reports. He was 61 years old, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and then weathered by decades of hard service. Every human ship and every human worker was coming home. The numbers were staggering. Over 2 million humans had been living and working across alien space. Engineers, doctors, teachers, farmers, scientists, pilots, builders, all of them were coming back. Kevin thought about the years he had spent serving alongside alien officers in joint fleet operations. He had respected many of them. He had even called a few of them friends. But he also remembered the private briefings, the classified reports that had slowly painted a picture of betrayal so deep that it made his stomach turn. The Council had been working against humanity for years. Not openly, not honestly, but quietly, in the dark, funding separatist movements on human colony worlds, manipulating trade agreements to keep human economies dependent, blocking human technological development through buried regulations. They had smiled at humanity across the negotiating table while stabbing them under it. His daughter, Lieutenant Casey Bradley, was out there right now, piloting a transport ship called the Bright Passage. She was on her last run, picking up human aid workers from a medical station on the Drenaki border. Kevin pulled up her ship's tracking signal on his display and watched the small blue dot moving across the star map. She was almost home. Casey Bradley was 29 years old and had her father's stubborn jaw and her mother's kind eyes. She brought the Bright Passage into dock at the medical station and opened the cargo ramps. The human medical team came aboard quickly and quietly. They had already said their goodbyes. Most of them looked tired and sad. The last one up the ramp was a nurse named Sammy Torres, a young man with dark circles under his eyes. He stopped at the top of the ramp and looked back. A crowd had gathered outside the station. Drenaki civilians, tall and heavy and usually so proud, standing in the cold of the docking bay with their children. They were not angry. They were not shouting. They were just watching, and some of them were crying in the way that Drenaki cried, with a low rumbling sound that came from deep in their chests. A Drenaki child, no older than 6 or 7 by human standards, broke free from her mother and ran toward the ramp. She held up a small drawing, stick figures of a human and a Drenaki standing together under a yellow sun. Sammy knelt down, took the drawing, and held the child's hand for a moment. Then her mother came and gently pulled her back. Casey closed the ramp and powered up the engines. She did not say anything for a long time. Neither did anyone else on the ship. Back on the Council station, the emergency summit, called by the Valori, was descending into chaos. The Valori Prime Resonance proposed a package of economic sanctions against humanity, freezing human assets held in alien banks, restricting access to shared scientific databases, imposing travel bans on human vessels. If they wish to isolate themselves, the Prime Resonance said in its calm, harmonic voice, then we will ensure that isolation is complete and painful. They will return when they understand the cost of standing alone. Councillor Fiss listened to this with growing unease. He had studied humans more carefully than most of his colleagues. He had read their history, their literature, their military records. He knew something that the Valori apparently did not. Humans did not respond well to threats. Threatening a human was like throwing water on a grease fire. It only made things worse. The Drenaki ambassador, a scarred old warrior named Groth, rose from his seat and spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "You are fools," he said simply. "The humans did not leave because they were weak. They left because they were strong enough to survive without us. Can any of you say the same?" Nobody answered. Groth looked around the chamber with contempt. "I thought not." He sat back down. The sanctions proposal was put to a vote. It passed, but barely, and the Drenaki refused to sign. So did the Kithrani Syndicate, who were more interested in profit than politics and saw no benefit in angering a species that controlled some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy. That night, a Sethari intelligence officer named Councillor Thiss had personally assigned to monitor human communications, intercepted a fragment of a military broadcast. It was brief, barely 2 seconds of audio that had leaked through a gap in humanity's signal blackout. The voice was calm, measured, and completely without emotion. Phase 2 is greenlit. Begin full-spectrum silence. The voice was later identified as belonging to General Danny Marsh, commander of Earth's Strategic Operations Division. The intelligence officer sent the recording to Thiss with a short note. They are not retreating. They are positioning. Thiss played the recording 3 times. Then he sat alone in his dark office for a very long time, listening to the silence that was spreading across the galaxy like a slow and heavy tide. And he wondered if the Council had any idea what it had done. 3 weeks after the withdrawal, human space was a black hole on every star map in the galaxy. No signals came out. No signals went in. Ships that approached the border found nothing. No patrols, no warning buoys, no signs of life at all. Just empty space and a silence so deep it felt like the universe itself had swallowed everything behind that invisible line. The Kithrani Syndicate saw opportunity in the chaos. They were a species built for trade, with long, flexible bodies, quick minds, and a cultural belief that every crisis was simply a market waiting to be exploited. Within days of the human withdrawal, Kithrani merchants were flooding into the gaps left behind, offering to replace human goods and services at what they called competitive rates. The rates were not competitive. They were robbery. Medical supplies that humans had provided for free were now being sold at 10 times their production cost. Spare parts for relay stations were marked up so high that most colonies could not afford them. The Kithrani did not have the skill to manufacture human-quality goods, so they bought cheap alternatives from whoever was selling and repackaged them with confident promises. The alternatives broke within weeks. The promises turned out to be worthless. Famine warnings were now active on 12 worlds. 3 of them were Sethari colonies. 2 were Drenaki border settlements. The rest were smaller species who had quietly depended on human agricultural support without ever publicly admitting it. The Council sent emergency food shipments, but the logistics were a disaster, without human transport coordinators managing the supply chains. Shipments arrived late, went to the wrong planets, or spoiled in transit because nobody had thought to check the cargo temperature settings. Counselor Thys could not sleep. He spent his nights reading reports, and his days arguing with colleagues who still believed the humans would come crawling back any day now. They did not understand. They had never understood. Humans did not crawl. He made a decision. He would go to the border himself. Thys assembled a small diplomatic fleet, 3 ships, lightly armed, carrying a crew of Sithari diplomats and scholars. No weapons locked, no aggressive posture. He flew to the nearest point on the human border, a stretch of empty space near the Kepler drift, and he stopped. He broadcast a greeting on every frequency he knew. Then, he waited. 1 day passed. Nothing. 2 days. 3 days. The stars did not move. The silence did not break. His crew grew restless. Some of them wanted to cross the border and take their chances. He knew that whatever was waiting on the other side of that line, it was not something he wanted to meet uninvited. On the 4th day, Thys began recording personal messages and broadcasting them into human space. He talked about the crisis. He talked about the famine. He talked about the children on Thessar Prime who were going hungry. He did not beg. He simply told the truth and hoped someone was listening. On the 7th day, a ship appeared. It came out of nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel, so close to Thys's fleet that every alarm on every ship screamed at once. It was a human corvette, small and sleek, and painted in the dark gray of the Earth Federation Navy. It sat in space like a stone in still water, perfectly calm, perfectly still. A communication channel opened. A young woman's face appeared on the screen. She had red hair pulled back tight, and pale green eyes that showed nothing at all. Her uniform identified her as Lieutenant Maggie Saunders. "Counselor Thys," she said. Her voice was polite but empty, like someone reading from a script they did not care about. "The United Earth Federation has nothing to say to the Galactic Council. You are advised to leave." Thys leaned forward. "Lieutenant, there are worlds starving out here, worlds that your people helped build. Surely, you are advised to leave," Maggie repeated. The channel closed. The corvette remained in place, watching, until Thys ordered his fleet to turn around and go home. Back on Earth, in a university office in Chicago, Dr. Pete Holloway sat surrounded by 20 years of his life's work. Shelves of alien language dictionaries, walls covered in translation charts, a desk buried under half-finished papers about cross-species communication theory. He had dedicated his career to the idea that understanding between species was not just possible, but necessary. He had believed it the way some people believe in gravity, as a fundamental truth that held everything together. The withdrawal had broken something inside him. He had not left his office in 3 days. He ate cold food from cans and drank coffee that had gone stale. He kept the news off because every report made him feel worse. He could not understand why his government had done this. He could not understand why they had thrown away everything he had spent his life building. Then Laura Griffin came to see him. The Secretary of Defense did not normally make house calls to university professors. But Pete Holloway was not just any professor. He had been the lead translator on first contact missions with 4 different species. He had friends on a dozen alien worlds. He was, in many ways, the human face of galactic cooperation. Laura sat across from him in his cluttered office and placed a data tablet on his desk. "Read this," she said. Pete picked up the tablet. The files were classified at the highest level. They contained intercepted communications between the Vailori Collective and agents operating inside human colonial governments. They contained financial records showing council funds being funneled to separatist groups on 3 human colony worlds. They contained technical documents proving that the Council had deliberately blocked humanity's application to develop its own independent relay network, not because of safety concerns, as they had publicly claimed, but because an independent human communication network would reduce human dependence on Council infrastructure. The deeper Pete read, the colder he felt. The Council had not just been dismissive of humanity. They had been actively working to keep humans weak. They had funded the rebellion on New Cascadia that had killed 200 people. They had sabotaged the colony ship program that would have given humanity 3 new worlds. They had manipulated trade tariffs to drain human economies while making it look like natural market forces. Pete put the tablet down. His hands were shaking. "How long have you known?" 5 years, Laura said. "We spent the first 2 confirming it. We spent the next 3 preparing for today." Pete stared at the wall. 20 years of building bridges, and the people on the other side had been planting bombs under them the whole time. Laura stood up. "I'm not showing you this to hurt you, Pete. I'm showing you because when this is over, we're gonna need people like you. People who still believe in talking. But right now, we need silence. And I need you to understand why." Pete nodded slowly. He did not speak for a long time after she left. In the Outer Rim, the Viori tried a different approach. If Earth's government would not talk, perhaps humanity's colonies could be separated from the whole. They sent small delegations to 5 human colony worlds, bypassing Earth entirely, carrying gifts and promises of independent trade agreements. Every single colony refused contact. Some did not even respond to the hails. One colony, a farming world called New Abilene, sent back a message that spread across the galaxy within hours. The colonial governor, a retired schoolteacher named Grace Whitley, had written it herself. "We don't answer doors when we've already told you to leave." 7 words. No anger, no threats, just a closed door and the absolute certainty that it would stay closed. The Valori delegation returned to the council station in silence. They had sent their finest diplomats to crack humanity's unity, and a 60-year-old schoolteacher had sent them home with a sentence. That night, for the first time in recorded history, the lights in the Valori meditation chamber went dark. The hive mind was thinking, and whatever it was thinking about, it did not want anyone else to see. 3 months after the humans disappeared behind their borders, the galaxy looked like a building with half its walls knocked out. It was still standing, but barely, and everyone inside was holding their breath. The Galactic Council met every day now, which was something it had not done since the last interstellar war 4,000 years ago. The sessions were loud and bitter. Species that had been polite allies for centuries were turning on each other. The Sethari blamed the Valori for driving the humans away. The Valori blamed the Sethari for not controlling their outer colonies, which were now threatening to break away. The Arumi blamed everyone for the economic collapse and demanded compensation that nobody could afford to pay. The Drenaki had stopped coming to sessions entirely. They had pulled their fleets back to their own borders and were patrolling them with a level of force that made their neighbors very uncomfortable. When asked to explain, the Drenaki ambassador Groth had said only, "We protected ourselves by trusting the Council's promises. The Council's promises are clearly worthless, so now we protect ourselves alone." In the dark of deep space, on the far side of humanity's sealed border, Admiral Ricky Dawson stood on the observation deck of the carrier Resolute and looked out at the stars. The Resolute was one of Earth's newest warships, a massive vessel carrying 4,000 crew and enough firepower to crack a moon. It was positioned at a strategic point where it could monitor 3 different sectors of alien space without being detected. Ricky was 54 years old, lean and quiet, with the kind of calm that only came from years of difficult decisions. He held a cup of coffee in one hand and a data pad in the other. The data pad showed him everything. Council transmissions they were intercepting, fleet movements from 6 different species, economic reports, famine statistics, political analysis. He read it all, every day, and every day it got worse. He did not enjoy watching this. Some people in the fleet did. He had heard the talk in the mess halls and the corridors. Some of his officers thought the aliens deserved everything they were getting. After what the Council had done, the sabotage, the manipulation, the quiet war against humanity that had been going on for decades, there was a part of every human that wanted to see them suffer. Ricky understood that feeling. He even shared it sometimes, in the dark hours of the night, when he could not sleep. But he also remembered the Drenaki captain, named Vorath, who had pulled his damaged ship out of a minefield during the Kessler incident, risking his own crew to save a human frigate. He remembered the Safari doctor who had spent 3 years on a human colony world treating a disease that was killing children, working without pay because she said it was the right thing to do. He remembered the Orumi musician who had composed a symphony for his daughter's wedding, a piece of music so beautiful that it had made everyone in the room cry, human and alien alike. The galaxy was not just the Council. The galaxy was full of people, and most of them had nothing to do with the decisions that had brought everyone to this point. Ricky set down his coffee and opened his personal log. Day 93, he recorded quietly. The Sathari outer colonies are on the edge of full rebellion. 3 more worlds have declared food emergencies. The Kithrani price gouging is getting worse. The Velori are holding emergency sessions that last 16 hours and produce nothing. I keep thinking about something my father used to say, that the hardest part of being strong is knowing when to stop proving it. He closed the log and went back to watching the stars. On Earth, the debate that had been building for weeks finally erupted into the open. Senator Nora Beckett stood on the floor of the United Earth Senate in Geneva and delivered a speech that would be remembered for generations. She was 47 years old, with sharp features and a voice that could carry across a room without needing to rise above a conversational tone. She had supported the withdrawal. She had seen the evidence of the Council's betrayal, and she had agreed that humanity needed to act. But she had not agreed to this. "We have made our point," she said, looking around the chamber at her colleagues. "The galaxy knows what it did to us. The galaxy knows what it lost. But there are children starving on worlds that never voted to harm us. There are sick people dying in hospitals that our doctors used to run. There are farmers watching their crops die because we pulled out the people who taught them how to grow food in alien soil." She paused, letting the silence fill the room. "We left because we were betrayed. That was right. But if we sit behind our borders and watch innocent people suffer because of what their governments did, then we are not the species I thought we were. I am not asking us to go back to the Council. I am asking us to open humanitarian channels. Medicine, food, nothing more. Because being strong does not mean being cruel, and right now, our strength looks a lot like cruelty." The chamber was quiet. Then the argument started. Secretary of Defense Laura Griffin spoke against the proposal. She was not heartless. Everyone who knew her understood that. But she was a strategist, and she saw the danger clearly. "Every crack we open in the wall will be exploited," she said. "The Velori are already looking for ways to divide us. If we send aid ships, they will use those ships as communication channels. They will use our generosity as a weakness. They have done it before. They will do it again." The vote was close. The humanitarian proposal was defeated by 12 votes. Nora sat down in her seat and stared at the floor. She was not done fighting, but today was not her day. 6,000 light-years away, on the Council station, the truth finally came out. The Velori Prime Resonance, the oldest and most powerful mind in the Velori Collective, called a special session of the full Council. Every species was required to attend. The chamber was full to the point of overflowing, because rumors had been spreading for days that something massive was about to happen. The Prime Resonance stood at the center of the highest platform, glowing brighter than usual, and spoke in a voice that resonated through every translator in the room. "We must speak of what was done to the humans." The chamber went still. The operations against humanity's colonial stability were not conducted by rogue elements. They were authorized by this body. They were funded by council resources. And they were approved by the Vylori Collective. A wave of shock rolled through the chamber. Species that had suspected the truth now heard it confirmed. Species that had believed the Council's denials now understood they had been lied to. "We made this decision because we were afraid," the Prime Resonance continued. "Humans adapt faster than any species in recorded history. They form bonds across biological and cultural barriers that should be impossible. They grow at a rate that our models cannot predict. We calculated that within 200 years, humans would hold more influence in this galaxy than any other species, including the Vylori. We acted to prevent this. We were wrong." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, one by one, delegations began to stand and leave. The Sethari walked out first, and the Orumi, then dozens of smaller species who had trusted the Vylori to lead with wisdom, and now understood that they had been led by fear. The Drenaki ambassador Groth was the last to speak before he left. He stood at his podium and looked up at the Prime Resonance, with an expression that mixed disgust with something that almost looked like pity. "You feared what humans could do together," he said. "Now you will learn what the galaxy cannot do without them." He walked out, and he did not come back. That night, Admiral Ricky Dawson received a full transcript of the session through the intelligence channels that were still quietly monitoring Council communications. He read it twice. Then he forwarded it to every ship in the fleet with a single note attached. Now they know. The question is what they do with it. He went back to the observation deck, looked out at the silent stars, and waited for the galaxy to decide what kind of future it wanted. 6 months after humanity closed its borders, the galaxy was a different place. It was not a better place, not yet, but it was different in ways that nobody had predicted. The collapse that everyone had feared, the total breakdown of galactic civilization, had not happened. It had come close. There had been dark weeks when it seemed like the whole structure was going to fall apart. But it did not fall, because the species of the galaxy, forced to stand on their own legs for the first time in decades, had discovered that they still had legs. The Drenaki, who had always relied on human engineers to maintain their aging fleet, had retrained their own mechanics from scratch. It was slow and painful work. Ships broke down more often. Repairs took 3 times as long. But the Drenaki were a proud people, and they refused to let their warships sit idle. Within 3 months, they had a functioning maintenance corps of their own. It was not as good as what the humans had built, but it was theirs. The Sathari outer colonies, the ones that had nearly starved, had formed a mutual aid network with 6 neighboring species. They shared food, shared transport, shared knowledge. They called it the Rim Compact, and it operated entirely outside the Council's authority. Councillor Thys had quietly supported it from the beginning, funneling resources and political cover to the colonies that needed it most. He had not asked for permission from the Council. He had stopped believing the Council was capable of giving it. The Vylori Collective had withdrawn into itself. The Prime Resonance had not spoken publicly since the confession. The hive mind was fractured in ways that had never happened before. Individual Vylori were expressing independent opinions, questioning the Collective's decisions, even leaving the homeworld to live among other species. It was a crisis of identity for the oldest civilization in the galaxy, and nobody knew how it would end. The Galactic Council still existed, technically, but it was a shell. Sessions were attended by fewer than half the member species. Votes were meaningless because nobody enforced them. The Great Chamber, once the heart of galactic governance, echoed with empty seats and unanswered questions. And then, on a cold morning, on a small Kithrani colony world called Verat 6, a ship appeared in orbit. It was a human ship, a medical frigate, white-hulled and unarmed, with a green cross painted on its side, and the name Gentle Morning written across the bow. It did not announce itself to the Council. It did not contact any government. It simply appeared, requested landing clearance from the local port authority, and touched down on a dusty field outside the colony's only hospital. The hospital was overwhelmed. Verat 6 had been hit hard by the economic collapse. The Kithrani syndicate had abandoned the colony when it stopped being profitable, and the remaining population, mostly miners and their families, had been struggling with contaminated water supplies for months. Disease was spreading. Medicine was running out. The local doctors were doing their best, but their best was not enough. The cargo ramp of the Gentle Morning opened, and Dr. Hannah Cole walked out into the dusty sunlight. She was 36 years old, small and dark-haired, with the kind of tired eyes that came from too many late nights in too many hospitals. She carried a medical bag over one shoulder and a datapad in the other hand. Behind her came a team of 20 volunteers, doctors, nurses, technicians, all human, all civilian, all unpaid. The colony's head doctor, a Kithrani named Resh, met them at the bottom of the ramp. He was thin and exhausted, and his long body swayed slightly as he stood. He looked at Hannah with an expression that was half suspicion and half desperate hope. "Why are you here?" he asked. Hannah looked at the hospital behind him. The cracked walls, the overcrowded wards visible through the windows, the line of sick people waiting outside in the heat. She looked back at Resh and said, "Because you need help." "Your government sent you?" "No. We volunteered. We are not here as representatives of anyone. We are just doctors." Resh stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his face broke, and he stepped aside and let them through. Within an hour, the human medical team had set up a field clinic in the hospital courtyard and was treating patients. No flags were raised, no speeches were made, no cameras were rolling. They just worked. On Earth, Laura Griffin watched the reports from Verat 6 on her screen and felt something shift inside her chest. She had fought against opening humanitarian channels. She had argued that any contact would be exploited, and she had been right about the risks. But she had been wrong about something more important. Nora Beckett had been right. Humanity could not watch people suffer and do nothing. It was not in their nature. It was not in their blood. They could build walls and close borders and seal themselves away from a galaxy that had betrayed them. But sooner or later, someone was going to open a door, because that was what humans did. They helped, even when it hurt, even when it was not smart, even when the people they were helping did not deserve it. Laura picked up her phone and called Nora. "You win," she said quietly. "This is not about winning," Nora replied. "I know. That is why you win." The news of the Gentle Morning spread across the galaxy like fire. Species that had given up hope began to pay attention. The Dranaki sent a formal message to Earth, not to the government, but to the people. It was the first direct communication between humans and any alien species since the withdrawal. Nathan Cole, the former ambassador, had spent 6 months in a small cabin in Vermont, far from politics and diplomacy and the weight of what he had done. He chopped wood, he read books, he took long walks through forests that were just beginning to turn green with spring. He did not watch the news. He did not take calls. Until the call from the president. They wanted him to go back, not to the council, The council was broken, and nobody pretended otherwise. They wanted him to go to the Drenaki homeworld, where representatives from 18 species had gathered to discuss something new. Not a reformed council, not a patched-up version of the old system, something entirely different. Nathan flew to the meeting alone. He sat in a room with 18 alien diplomats and laid out a proposal that he had been quietly writing in his cabin for 3 months, on paper with a pen, because some things needed to be written by hand. The proposal was simple. No species would preside over others. No senior members, no junior members. Every voice carried equal weight. All military and intelligence operations would be fully transparent. Any species caught conducting covert operations against another would be immediately expelled with no appeal. Trade would be fair and open. Aid would be given freely and never used as leverage. "This will be harder than the old system," Nathan said. "It will be slower. It will be messier. It will require more trust than any of us have earned yet. But it will be real, and real is the only thing worth building." The Drenaki signed first. Ambassador Groth pressed his massive hand against the document and looked at Nathan with something that might have been respect. "We should have listened to you years ago," he said. "You are listening now," Nathan replied. "That is enough." The Safari outer colonies signed next, with Councillor Theiss representing them personally. Then the Orumi, the Kithrani, and one by one, a dozen other species. The Velori did not sign that day. They were not ready. But they sent a message saying they were watching, and for the first time, that felt like enough. On the carrier Resolute, Admiral Ricky Dawson received orders to open the borders. He stood on the observation deck and watched the first joint human-alien patrol cross into open space. 2 human frigates and a Drenaki cruiser flying side by side, their signals open, their weapons cold. Lieutenant Maggie Saunders, now promoted to lieutenant commander, stood beside him. She had been the one to turn Theiss away at the border 3 months ago. She had delivered the coldest words of her life that day, and she had not slept well since. "Think it will hold this time?" she asked quietly. Ricky watched the ships grow smaller against the stars. He thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the silence, the pain, the slow and stubborn reaching out that humans could never seem to stop doing, no matter how badly they were burned. "It does not matter if it holds," he said. "It matters that we keep choosing to build it." Maggie nodded. She did not say anything else. She just watched the stars with him, and for the first time in 6 months, the silence between human space and the rest of the galaxy felt like something other than a wall. Like the pause between one sentence and the next, when the story is not over, but the hardest part has finally been said. 8,000 light-years away, on the farming world of New Abilene, Grace Whitley was sitting on her front porch when she saw the shuttle land in the field beyond her fence. She watched a tall, thin figure step out, a Velori, its crystal body glowing faintly in the late afternoon light. It walked up the dirt path to her house slowly, awkwardly, like someone who had never walked on unpaved ground before. Grace stood up from her rocking chair and waited. The Velori stopped at the bottom of her porch steps and looked up at her. It did not speak. It did not seem to know what to say. Grace looked at the alien for a long moment. She thought about everything that had happened. She thought about the anger and the hurt and the long months of silence. She thought about the drawing that the Drenaki child had given to the nurse on the last transport. She thought about coffee. She stepped aside and held the door open. "Well, come on in then," she said. "I just made coffee." The Velori hesitated. Then it climbed the steps, ducked its tall head under the doorframe, and went inside. Behind them, the sun was setting over the wheat fields of New Abilene, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, and somewhere out among the stars, the galaxy was learning, slowly and painfully, and one small act of kindness at a time, what it meant to begin again.